Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hi, everyone.
Today we're jumping into a field where artificial intelligence and machine learning are, well, generating some serious buzz. We're talking drug discovery.
Right. It's a big one.
We're going to unpack how these technologies are being used, like right now, to predict which potential drugs might actually hit the mark.
And how they help scientists pick the best candidates to even develop in the first place.
Exactly.
We've gathered quite a bit of info looking at the old ways, the traditional process, and comparing that to some really interesting real-world examples from the literature showing what AI can do now.
Yeah, the goal is really to give everyone a clear picture. How are the algorithms built? Why is data so crucial?
And maybe highlight some of the wins, the successes we're already seeing.
So our mission for you today, pretty straightforward, really. We want you to walk away understanding the key roles AI and ML are playing in modern pharma R&D.
Think of it as your fast track, maybe, to getting a handle on this really complex and, frankly, fast-moving field.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Maybe a quick look at how drugs were traditionally developed, because it wasn't simple.
Oh, not at all. That book, Drug Development, From Discovery to Market, it really paints a picture of just how complex and challenging it is. So many scientific hurdles, plus the whole regulatory side of things.
That's right. It's like incredibly structured. You start trying to find a molecule, something that might have an effect.
The discovery phase.
Right. Then you've got preclinical testing labs, animal models, testing safety, basic effectiveness.
Then the big one, clinical trials, testing in people, which takes years.
Phases 1, 2, 3.
And then you have to navigate the, well, sometimes confusing regulatory approval process.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Easily a decade, sometimes more.
And the cost. Huge.
Yeah.
Billions for just one successful drug, often.
Exactly. And this is really where AI and ML are starting to step in and hopefully make a difference.
So where's the biggest impact right now? Well, one of the really promising areas is predicting these drug-target interactions. I mean, think about it. The sheer number of possible drug molecules, and then thousands of potential targets in our bodies linked to diseases. Trying to figure out which molecule fits which target effectively, that's always been a massive bottleneck.
It's that key in a lock analogy, but on a crazy scale, like almost infinite keys and locks.
Pretty much. Now, these AI and ML algorithms, they can chew through enormous amounts of data. Biological data, chemical data.
What kind of data are we talking about?
Things like the 3D shapes of proteins, the chemical properties of different molecules, results from millions of past experiments, all of it.
Okay.
And by learning from all that historical data, they start to get good at predicting how a new molecule might bind to a specific target.
And what might happen if it does bind? Yeah. The potential effects.
Exactly, what the consequences of that interaction might be.
That leads into this idea of structure-activity relationships, right?
Precisely. That's a core concept. The book, Evaluation of Drug Candidates for Preclinical Development, really dives into this. Researchers have, forever tried to figure out how the specific shape and atoms in a molecule...
How they dictate what it actually does biologically.
Right. And traditionally. That meant tons of painstaking lab work, making tiny changes to a molecule, testing it, making another change, testing it.
Very slow, very iterative.
Very slow. But now we have these in silico methods basically done on a computer, and specifically things called ligand-based approaches. They help us understand these relationships much, much faster.
Okay, so give us an example.
All right, so the source mentions generating a pharmacophore model for HERG inhibiting properties.
Okay, break that down. Pharmacophore.HERG.
Yeah, so a pharmacophore model is basically like a 3D map. It shows the essential features a molecule needs to interact with a specific target. And HERG, that's a potassium channel in the heart. You really don't want drugs messing with it unintentionally. It can cause serious heart problems.
Got it. So they built a computer model to predict what kinds of molecules might block HERG.
Exactly. And the model they built, it achieved a correlation, an R-squared value of 0.90 compared to the actual lab data.
Wow, 0.90 is.
Yeah.
That's really good correlation.
It's excellent. But here's the kicker. They then tested this model on 22 different drugs it hadn't seen before.
Okay.
And it still showed a strong correlation, 0.83.
That's impressive. So it wasn't just good on the data it trained on, it could generalize.
Right. And it even predicted a specific type of molecule likely to bind strongly to HERG, something with 4 hydrophobic bits in a pyramid shape, and a positively charged point at the top.
That level of detail predictively.
It's a potential game changer. Think about the wasted effort it could save, instead of testing thousands of random things in the lab.
You focus the experiments on the ones the AI flags as most likely or perhaps most problematic in this HERG case.
Exactly. It really highlights how AML can help optimize candidate selection, moving beyond just, blindly screening huge libraries.
So using these tools to prioritize, finding the needles in the haystack with a much higher probability of success, or maybe avoiding the dangerous needles early on.
That's a great way to put it. It narrows the focus, saves time, saves money.
Which brings us, naturally, to the data itself. These algorithms sound powerful, but they need fuel, right?
Absolutely critical. Data mining is fundamental here, these sophisticated models. They're only as smart as the data they learn from.
So the ability to dig through and make sense of these massive data sets, biological, chemical, pharmacological, that's the foundation.
It really is. Without good data and the tools to analyze it, the AML doesn't have much to work with.
And we're seeing a lot of action in this space, commercially and academically.
Oh, definitely. That report, Artificial Intelligence in Drug Development, Patenting, and Regulatory Aspects, it shows this surge in patent filings globally for AI in healthcare.
Yeah, I saw those figures showing the growth and where it's happening geographically.
It really paints a picture of intense innovation. And they even have these cluster maps showing what kind of AI technologies are being patented for healthcare.
Like specific applications.
Exactly. And looking at who's filing the patents, big pharma, startups, universities, gives you a sense of the ecosystem. It's very dynamic.
Okay, let's maybe peek under the hood. Just a tiny bit, without getting lost in the weeds. How do these algorithms actually make the predictions? What's the basic idea?
Sure. At a high level, many of these are about pattern recognition in huge data sets. Some use neural networks.
Like mimicking the brain, sort of?
In a very, very simplified way, yes. They learn complex patterns from the input data, maybe learning relationships between molecular structures and biological activity. Others might use different machine learning techniques like statistical models, support vector machines, decision trees.
Lots of different tools in the toolbox.
Exactly. The key point is they can process vastly more information and spot much more subtle patterns than a human researcher ever could manually.
So they're learning from everything that's come before to make smarter guesses about the future.
That's a good way to think about it. Educated guesses, but powered by massive amounts of data.
Okay, let's ground this in reality. You mentioned real-world examples. What are some concrete cases where this has worked?
Right, so that paper, The Era of Artificial Intelligence, it mentions a study on factor ASA inhibitors. Factor ASA is involved in blood clotting.
Okay.
Researchers use what's called virtual screening, basically, using AI to search through a huge digital library of molecules.
Looking for potential matches for factor E's.
Exactly, to predict which ones might inhibit it. And the crucial part, they then went into the lab and experimentally confirmed that the AI's predictions were accurate for some candidates.
That's fantastic. The computer prediction directly guiding the lab work and being proven right.
It's a great validation. Another really compelling one is from Martin and colleagues in 2019. They developed these all-assay Max2 PQSR models.
Sounds technical. What do they do?
Okay, so they built models to predict drug activity. And these models achieved an accuracy that was comparable to actually running standard lab tests. These things called 4-concentration IC50 assays.
IC50, that measures how potent a drug is, right? How much you need.
Exactly. It tells you the concentration needed to inhibit something by 50%. It's a standard benchmark.
So the computer model was about as good as the real lab test.
Across a huge data set of experiments from Novartis, yeah. That's the remarkable part, getting that kind of predictive power computationally across so many different assays.
That's a massive efficiency gain.
Yeah.
Imagine skipping some of those initial lab tests if the model is reliable enough.
That's the potential, absolutely. Huge implications for speeding things up.
Any other examples?
One more, maybe a bit more foundational, but still important. Unsupervised database clustering. A paper by Butina back in '99 described using computational methods.
Like molecular fingerprints.
Right, and Tanimoto's similarity ways to measure how alike molecules are to automatically group large sets of compounds.
So not predicting activity directly, but organizing the possibilities.
Exactly. It might not sound as flashy, but automatically clustering millions of compounds based on structure helps researchers identify interesting neighborhoods in chemical space to focus on.
Ah, okay. Like creating a map of the chemical universe and highlighting the potentially interesting areas to explore further.
Precisely. It helps guide the search.
Now, this is crucial. Even if AI finds a fantastic-looking candidate, That's not the end of the story, right?
Not even close. It's really just the beginning of the next phase. As evaluation of drug candidates points out, these molecules, however promising they look in silico, have to go through rigorous preclinical testing.
Back to the lab.
Back to the lab. You need to understand pharmacokinetics PK, how the body handles the drug. Absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, ADME.
Right. The whole ADME profile. Does it get where it needs to go? Does it stick around too long? Does it break down into something toxic?
All of that, plus general toxicology and safety testing in animals before you can even think about humans.
So the computer might say, great fit for the target, but the body might just chew it up instantly, or it might be harmful.
Exactly. Biology is complicated. We still absolutely need those preclinical studies.
And then, assuming it passes preclinical, then come the clinical trials.
The ultimate test. Sources like Fundamentals of Clinical Trials or Clinical Trial Design go into huge detail here. Testing in human volunteers is non-negotiable.
Phase Y for safety, Phase 2 for initial efficacy, Phase 3 for larger-scale confirmation.
It's a massive, complex, and essential undertaking to prove both safety and effectiveness in people.
And we can't forget ADME again, right? Understanding how the drug behaves in humans is key. Books like ADME Processes or Basic Pharmacokinetics cover this. AI might help predict it, but you need the real-world data.
Absolutely. Predictions need validation through real experiments and observations in biological systems, especially in humans.
And layered on top of all this science is the regulatory and business side.
Right. You need regulatory approval, like from the FDA, and sources like AI and drug development patenting and fundamentals of industrial chemistry touch on this. You need to navigate that landscape, secure patents.
So the AI discovery doesn't bypass any of that. It just, hopefully, gets you to the starting line of those later stages faster and with a better candidate.
That's the goal, a more efficient front end to a still very long and complex process.
Okay, so pulling this all together,
Yeah.
it feels pretty clear that AI and machine learning aren't just hype in drug discovery anymore.
No, they're definitely being used. They're tools being actively applied to speed up those crucial early steps. Identifying targets, picking better candidates.
Making that initial search faster, more focused, more efficient.
Exactly. These tools let researchers grapple with incredible data complexity, make more accurate predictions about molecular interactions.
And prioritize the leads that really have the best shot, with a speed and precision that, well, just wasn't possible before.
It's a significant shift in capability for the early pipeline.
Which does lead to a final thought, something for our listeners to maybe chew on. Given how fast AI is moving and how much biological data we keep generating, what's next? What other, maybe even more revolutionary changes could we see coming down the pike in drug discovery in the next few years?
It's a huge question, and maybe what are the ethical considerations that come along with that increasing power?
Definitely something fascinating to think about.
Well, we hope this deep dive gave you some solid insights. We'd encourage you to explore the sources we mentioned if you want to go deeper.
Thanks for joining us today.